It is 3:45, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Town of Ulysses Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee meeting to order for April 18th, 2024. I'm Liz Weatherby, and I'm going to be sitting in as I am the vice chair, but I'm going to be sitting in as the chair today and acting as the chair in Petta's absence. And I'd like just to quickly, so you guys know who everybody is, just very quickly go down by names.
Carl Plankowski.
York Santorino. Hi, Sullivan. And Allison Weaver will be here shortly. So we do have an agenda for today. It's a brief agenda. Is there any questions, comments, discussion on the agenda? If not, could I get a motion?
I'll second it.
Second, all right, all in favor?
Yep.
Great. So our first and really only portion of business today is for your presentation. So just to kind of set the ballpark for everybody listening in or who might be watching later, we're going to have an interview from MRB here today. 1 hour is being allotted for the interview. We're going to give you guys 15 minutes to present. Give us a kind of quick update and presentation on your proposal that you get issued to us. And then we have about 6 questions that various members of the committee are going to be asking. We've allotted about 15, the rest of the time, the 45 minutes, but like 15 minutes each. Niels will be keeping track of the timing. So if you have 6 minutes per question, Niels will let us know when 3 minutes is up, and then he'll let you know when 1 minute is up, just so you're not caught off guard. And just for general context, the questions that we've come up with to kind of build on your proposals are surrounding sustainability, housing, agriculture, kind of the process and coordination of this whole plan, and then natural resources and public engagement. So those are kind of like the topics that we wanted to just build more on. So if you guys have any questions, happy to answer them on the kind of the procedures here. Otherwise, here's your floor.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks so much. Thanks for the opportunity to present. I'll let my colleague Matt introduce himself.
Matt McKenna with MRB Group, civil engineer. I've been with MRB Group. This will be my 13th year. I've been here right out of college. So.
And I'm Matt Horn. I'm the Director of Local Government Services for MRB Group. We're MRB, obviously lots of folks in town are familiar with the engineering side. We've supported Ulysses significantly and neighboring communities. The Finger Lakes is our home. We're based in Rochester, offices in Waterloo, Geneva, Syracuse, Saratoga. So we're well versed regionally. Architecture and engineering is our bread and butter for 95 years. And about five or so years ago, we started this local government services group to provide services beyond engineering and design to support our local government clients. I'd say about 95% of the work MRB Group does is in the local government world, and about 95% of the clients are about the size of Ulysses. So we love working in rural communities. We love working in the Finger Lakes in particular, and we absolutely love local government. We're partnered with a group called Highland Planning. Highland is also based in Rochester. They are a planning firm, so they certainly work in a lot of sectors of planning. But their big focus is around public engagement, something they're really passionate about. It is a woman-owned business, and they've developed a lot of really unique tools that we can talk through and strategies for really engaging tough to reach segments of the community. And people that we especially want to hear from through this process. So you'll see Highland down the road a bit. So we love comprehensive planning. We'll talk about why in a moment, but you've seen our proposal, so you understand our approach. At its foundation, our comprehensive plans are grounded in actionable data. So one of the things we don't find a lot of value in is just brainstorming everybody's favorite project, right? Planning over the years has gotten a tough rap. A lot of people see it as a softer service that local government provides. People get planning fatigue. When you talk to folks about planning or studies or consultants, they kind of get this look on their face. If you look at comprehensive plans from around the country, they make really good shelf space taker-uppers, right? They sit there, they collect dust. The community doesn't have much to rally around. A lot of that comes from this concept of blue sky planning, this idea that anything can happen. And we're not sure that that's the case. What data tells us is here's what the market is doing here in Ulysses. Here's what the market is doing in our region. Here's what our demographics are. And that can point us in a lot of different directions. It's not destiny, right? But it gets us a good starting point. You are here. That's what that data tells us. Public engagement is just a deal breaker for us. We have to engage in a really meaningful way. We talk about public engagement as robust, meaning we do lots of it in lots of different ways with lots of different people. People communicate in different ways. People absorb information in different ways. People are excited about different things, and we want to tap into all of that. So robust, authentic means we're asking the question because we intend to do something about it, right? We're not just here checking a box. Well, the RFP said we got to do public engagement, so we'll ask a few people a few questions. We ask people questions because we need help understanding where they want this community to be. And meaningful means when they open up the plan, they're going to see themselves in that plan, right? They're going to see their fingerprints on the plan. And what that does is creates built-in champions for plan initiatives moving forward. The reason these plans sit on a shelf is because they're done by 5 or 10 folks in a room somewhere with 5 or 10 folks' big ideas. And then they go on the shelf. And when we go to implement something, it's an uphill slug, and the pitchforks and the torches come out and people get really fired up about this particular project or initiative. If we do public engagement in the right way, they're going to see themselves in the plan. They're going to show up in a good way, right? They're going to show up to participate and really champion the plan. So robust, authentic, meaningful public engagement. It's really anchored to this unified community vision. The idea here, the most important part we think of the comprehensive plan is a clear vision for where we want to be 15 to 20 years from today. It's authentic, but it's aspirational. It's something we're really reaching for. And it ultimately will serve as a filter, right? We don't like plans that are full of lists. A 20-year plan of list of things to do. Think back to where you were 20 years ago and what you knew about the world 20 years ago. Versus if we had established a vision 20 years ago for where we wanted to be today, and we use that to navigate through things like COVID and climate change and other things that we wrestle with. The vision is critical. And then finally, this relentless focus on implementation. I spent 20 years in the public sector. My last public sector job was I was the city manager of Geneva for about 10 years. Most of my team, 80+% of the local government team, comes from City Hall, Town Hall, Village Hall. And that's important for us because we understand what the capacity of government is. We understand what communities like Ulysses, who are built for speed, I say, lightweight, the resources, we've got the resources we've got, and we shouldn't build a plan that outstrips those resources. It can be aspirational, and it should be, but we need to have an implementation focus. And I think the folks on our team who've been in those seats bring that implementation focus. So when I was a city manager, one of the things that I felt myself get tugged into is the day-to-day or the month-to-month. You have a plan, you come in, you sit down at your desk, the phone rings, the plan's out the window, right? I watched council members or city councils, town boards, village boards move from agenda to agenda to agenda. Resolution establishing trick or treat night, and then next month we got to put together an update to our zoning, and the next month it's the next fire and the next fire and the next fire. This represents if you're doing it really well, a once in a decade opportunity to say, stop, let's pull back and think about where we want this community to be. It's not an opportunity that we get many, many times in our career. So if we're sitting here and getting ready to open up the hood, we need to really take advantage of that opportunity. It brings the community in to the decision-making process. In many communities, this is what you see at a normal board meeting, right? The chairs are empty. When there's a tax rate increase or an assessment increase, the chairs get full. But again, once that fire goes out, and the floodwaters recede, people go back to their day-to-day. This brings folks into the room to ask them those questions. It also serves as a real education tool for how government works, what's been going on in our community. I had the opportunity to read the minutes. I was so proud of you all for engaging in this process for so long up to this point. If you opened up that webpage and saw that's the stack of minutes, the work that you all been doing, you'd have thought you were 2/3 of the way through your planning process by now with the way you've engaged and plugged in. I would venture to say that you probably have learned something about Ulysses and about local government generally and how planning works in those discussions. The public is gonna tie on to that. They're gonna get excited about it. Once we're done and we have that vision statement and these core values, it's a clear communication to the market. What that means to me is when you're trying to bring in new residents or new investment into your community, we're not open to everybody. And that's not meant to be exclusionary, but what it's meant to say is we are interested in these kinds of projects. We are interested in these kinds of investments, and we are not interested in those. If you communicate that to the market clearly, you won't have to waste your time wading through a lot of proposals that don't align with your values at all, right? So having a good, clear, comprehensive plan will communicate your intention to the market. And then I'm a local government nerd, so I have really nerdy dreams. My dream is that I'm gonna walk to a town board meeting and they're gonna carry that comprehensive plan under their shoulder with their well-read agenda packet, right? And they're gonna sit down and make decisions based upon the comprehensive plan. The planning board is gonna have it at the corner of their desk and they're gonna flip through it when they have a site plan that doesn't feel right to them. The zoning board is gonna use it to address things like variances. It's a decision-making tool, right? It's not a list of projects. It's how we're gonna operate over the next 15 to 20 years. So that's why we love comprehensive plans. Why we love Ulysses is you're here. Again, back to that stack of minutes representing hours and hours of work that you've already done ahead of this RFP. Great places don't happen by accident, period, right? If you close your eyes and think about the coolest place you've ever been on vacation or the greatest place you've ever visited, or a place that you call home, things that you're really excited about, that happened intentionally. Somebody sat down and said, this is the kind of community we want to be. There are plenty of communities that happen haphazardly. We've been to those communities. You can see the collective impact of bad decisions over time. Those are haphazard communities. Really great communities operate with intentionality, and it's clear to us that that's where you are. Your focus on engaging residents and stakeholders is critical. It's important. We enjoy that. We don't want to be part of a comprehensive planning process that excludes that element, and you all made it clear that was priority. MRB Group spent 95 years working in water and wastewater, and that's a really engineering nutsy boltsy thing to hear out loud. But in reality, what it makes us is an environmental firm, a company that really focuses on environmental stewardship, translating the challenges of a community into something that's going to have a positive impact on our natural resources. And so we love communities that align with our values on that. And then, of course, I just mentioned we love rural, and you all are the Ulysses community on the whole, outside of some cool urban enclaves like Trumansburg, has a lot of rural to love, and we really love that. The strengths, your well-preserved rural landscape, we love that. Just got through saying that. You've got a reason for folks to come here, and they do in droves. I grew up down south. I got to New York State by way of Ovid. My wife and her family grew up in Romulus. And so we met in college and I moved up here. So for the last 30 years, I've been coming past Teganic Falls and thinking about how much I really wanted to live here. In the last 15 years, I've been able to do that here just right up the road. But beyond the natural bounty of Teganic Falls and Cayuga Lake, we love that your access to arts and culture and music. You're well known for that. You're this cool urban space, rural space, really well connected to some urban amenities, a great hospital, a great school district, colleges and universities just down the road, very accessible from here. Okay, and this professional approach to local government services. The challenges we see, escalating costs. This is something every community is facing, right? If you've got a little bit of a deferral on infrastructure or you're experiencing the need to grow, you're going to deal with those costs. Access to recreational facilities, of course, we followed closely the most recent attempts to expand upon that. We recognize the challenges there. Access to public water, right? We've been trying to figure out as a firm how to get you all expanded on your in your water system. Income disparity, one of the unique pieces of this kind of rural community is there are some real pockets of poverty, and rural poverty is one of the most challenging things to deal with. So you look at a overall median household income for a town and say, we're fine, 70 couple $1,000, that's a great number. But we know that's not fully representative, right? And then ensuring management of growth pressure, people know about you now, right? It's not a secret anymore. And so you're going to have to be faced with how your community character is going to shift over time. And then Cayuga Lake, it's the big economic engine. How do we protect it and keep it going? We're short on time, but we have seen communities, we've worked in communities like this before. Our approach would be very similar, bring stakeholders to the table, help them understand where the data is, help them understand the vision, or help them arrive at a unified vision for the community. We worked in the town of Ontario, sits right on Lake Ontario. So very agrarian, very rural, but surrounded by Monroe County, or I should say bounded by Monroe County and the fast growing parts of Monroe County, Webster. So they're trying to keep Webster out a bit and stop themselves from becoming kind of Anytown USA. We managed that project with a diverse steering committee, a lot of community stakeholders, specially designed public engagement strategy just for that community, the same way we'll do here. What worked in Ontario will not work here. What worked in Geneva will not work here. So we're going to have you all help us customize that. We taught people about what was really going on in the community, or they're an aging community. How are we going to wrestle with that? They've got a lot of people driving into work, but just as many driving out of work or out of town for work. Only a few folks living and working there. That was a surprise. This is an analysis we would run here as well to help educate folks about what's important. Decision makers, we're making broad judgment about what people think. Well, I know my neighbors, I know what they think. We did a heavy surveying to find out what they think, and it was surprising. So the data can educate folks. We immerse ourselves in the community. We bring our whole team to bear. We spend a couple of days on the ground here, meeting all the key stakeholders so that we're not making any assumptions about things. And then we connect. They created this great plan vision, and we connected that to how do we take from where we are today, how do we get to the vision? We identified these priority policy areas. So I would say from our perspective, we're a practitioner-based team. We know Ulysses well. We focus almost exclusively on local government, so we understand it really well. And we've worked with so many communities who really have activated these comprehensive plans toward economic success. That's what we're all about. Thank you. Thanks for the generosity of the time, Seth. Thank
you very much, Matt, for that. Great presentation. So I think we'll start working through our questions right now. And I believe Roxanne, you have the first one.
Okay, sure. Thanks for coming and giving us your presentation. The first question we have pertains to sustainability. We, as you know, have a grant from the Climate Smart Communities program to help update our comprehensive plan. One of the key goals for the 2045 update of our 2009 plan is to incorporate sustainability elements throughout. Sustainability is a broadly encompassing term, and climate change ties together and affects the approach to meeting planning and policy challenges for housing and transportation options, energy efficiency and affordability, resilient infrastructure, and the preservation of open space, working lands, and natural areas. So we'd like you to please share your thoughts on some key issues and or approaches that Ulysses might consider to support more sustainable and resilient growth and resource protection in the face of increasing climate variability.
Sure. Well, I want Matt to touch for a moment on the stormwater management and the kind of technology that we recommend to address lake health. And that's something that stormwater runoff piece.
Yeah, so obviously working in this area, I've been, down in Trumansburg, Ulysses for 10+ years, helping out with various water, drinking water, wastewater, stormwater related projects. And we obviously recognize that there is impairment to Cayuga Lake at the southern end. That's obviously impacted by all different varieties of pollution, and a lot of it is what you really can't measure. So when it comes out of a pipe, that's an easy place to sample it. When it comes from surface runoff, roadside drainage spills, that obviously will ultimately make its way to the lake, and that has a lot of nutrient, phosphorus, and fertilizers that can impact the lakes negatively. There's opportunity, and with plans, you can have the ability to plan and treat stormwater. That takes land available to have retention, biofiltration facilities, and that is obviously very costly. But with proper plans and working community-wide, you can achieve that. And the thing that, is a challenge for Ulysses is, one is topography. So you get a 10, 50, 100-year storm event, that all comes, hits, and then the topography drops off and the velocities carry that very significantly, make their way, greatly impacting what existing infrastructure you have. So proper planning for stormwater is only going to be a much more interested focus statewide in our attempts.
So I think, in the funding source itself wants you to address things like active transportation, right? We need to have green alternatives to automobile transportation. People get in cars for a reason, right? It's clumsy to get from here to there on a bike or walking. And so our plan would touch on where do people want to get to and what are the connections we can make that will make car travel less and less necessary. It also talks about green economic development. You're engaged in some of the most green economic development that there is out there, right? Tourism, agritourism, these kinds of things are things that not only kind of take advantage of the natural setting that you're in, but also rely less heavily on things that challenge natural resources. The land use piece is critical. Like I said, you're not a secret anymore. People know, particularly about Tompkins County and Ulysses and Trumansburg, and they want to be here. And there's a temptation on the part of local government that, hey, we need more bodies in the seats. We need more kids in the school district, need more people to pay property taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe, and in some cases that's true, but it's all about the character of the growth. And so what we're going to do in our land use planning exercise is to ensure that we're not challenging the environment or further damaging the environment with this unbridled growth. Is we're going to identify opportunities to do what we call conservation neighborhoods, which is the ability to address more density in a community without impacting natural resources, or by having less impact on natural resources. So things like clustered development and close-in development, right? There's no sense just because we got a big flat piece of ground doesn't mean we need a cul-de-sac on it, right? With 50 tract houses. We've got urban, semi-urban service centers here already have existing infrastructure in place. Existing infrastructure is much more efficient to care for and to upgrade than stretching infrastructure. Where you put water and sewer, you can expect development to come. If that development is beyond your urban center, then you're going to be dealing with transportation, runoff, and all of those issues that impact the environment. So I would also just touch quickly on this concept called the triple bottom line. It's something we believe pretty strongly in. The triple bottom line says we don't engage in anything just for dollars' sake. We balance our decisions with the environmental impact, the social impact, and the financial impact. Where those three overlap is what we call true sustainability. And the planning process that we're gonna go through is gonna evaluate decisions based on that triple bottom line.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, all right, you're up next. So Thomas is if you knew what the second question was gonna be. So the next question is a multi-part question relating to housing. So the first part you kind of touched on with the cluster development, so you can go more in depth if you want to. But then I'll also do the second part. So the first part, there are limited housing opportunities in Ulysses. How do you see housing stability fitting into the equation with other objectives such as environment, agriculture, recreation, etc.? You did a good job. So I'm not saying that. And then what is the second part is what is your vision for improving housing availability, accessibility, and affordability? And do you have any relevant experience that would provide a good example for the town of Ulysses to consider?
Yeah, so one of the things, back to that triple bottom line concept, one of the things we recognize is that, hey, we live in a community that we're largely, lots of jobs are driven by tourism and the service sector, right? What we don't want to get in the habit of is exporting our housing problem, right? And so if we're going to champion ourselves as a tourism economy, as a rural farming economy, we're going to recognize where the wage levels are in that conversation and start to think about how we diversify our housing stock to the point where housing becomes attainable. Safe housing becomes attainable to the workforce. So over the years, we've gotten super cute. People hear affordable housing, they run the other direction, right? We did a housing strategy for Livingston County, and a big chunk of that strategy was just educating people about what affordable housing really is. And so we move it along and we say, well, we'll focus on workforce housing. And workforce housing in a community with a service orientation is affordable housing in the most traditional sense of the word. And so we have to be thoughtful and mindful about that. And then third, just that environmental piece that we talked about. Density equals affordability in most cases, right? The more dense we can make things, the more affordable we can make them. If we're going to do that, we're going to have to cluster it around the hamlets and around the village, right? Where we can get infrastructure in place or upgrade existing infrastructure without impacting, without I should say creating sprawl, right? Just letting folks develop wherever they want to develop. So my vision, to the degree that I have a say in the vision of this community, which I don't, but what I would encourage you to think about as you're thinking about your vision is how do we create housing opportunities for folks who we want to live and work here, right? When we're talking about affordability, that's almost always going to be cluster development and density. To get there, you have to engage a land use strategy that protects farmland, for example, but ecological assets and other protected lands from development. In the town of Canandaigua, we've worked with them on affordable housing strategies, and what the town of Canandaigua did is they have a big map, their whole town geography, and they literally highlighted, here are our priorities: preservation of farmland, preservation of access to Canandaigua Lake, preservation of view sheds to Canandaigua Lake, and leveraging existing infrastructure. So they took a map and we said, all right, here's every property that provides public access to the lake today or opportunity for that. That's off the table for development. Here's every piece of active farmland today. That's off the table for development. Bing, bing, bing. We checked those lists all the way down. And before you know it, the town of Canandaigua, which looks like this on a map, the place where we could develop shot down to this small of an area, and they call that Uptown Canandaigua. Then what they did was take development regulations and lay those over that space to get almost, not exactly, but almost a unit for unit equality. If you took the prior zoning and said, well, you can build one house per 3 acres out here, well, that's a waste of time, all the way up to 10 houses per acre at the city limits, then add all that up. By the time you added all that up and compared it with the new development regulations for Uptown Canandaigua, it was almost a 1-for-1 exchange. And we got nearly the same potential taxable assessed value from it. So we weren't worried about a revenue piece. And we all know that single family residential is the biggest loser in the revenue game that there is. So if you're just allowing subdivision after subdivision after subdivision of single family residential, high service demand, high traffic impact, gobbles up a bunch of land, and puts your community really in peril from a service delivery standpoint. So the town of Uptown Canandaigua is a good example of someplace where we've done that. It's on the very front end. They just completed those land use regulations. They're starting to get project interest now. But every sign points to that it's going to work out. That answer your question?
Thank you. So you've kind of been hitting on it, but the next question actually pertains to agriculture. So, as you kind of probably got a sense when you're driving around, our town has agricultural resources that are important to our culture, also families and businesses. So we have a lot of still working family farms, not large scale farms of all different sizes. So with the changes that we're seeing in the climate, pressures from improved housing availability, as well as increases in environmental protection, what could you see the town doing to ensure that the farmer's voice is not lost in this conflict?
Yeah, so, well, relative to the voice, public engagement strategy has to identify the key stakeholders in the community, key stakeholder groups in the community. Agriculture is clearly one of those for this community. And back to that, I wish I had had a picture of this, back to that town of Ontario example. We heard early on that the town of Ontario was losing its farms. And for a lot of the reasons you just described, small family farming is challenging. So in the town of Ontario, what was actually happening are big corporate interests are buying up small family farms, changing the way farming operates. That development pressure from the West End that's coming in from Rochester and Webster. Everybody loves driving past the farm and they smile, it's very bucolic and it's relaxing. Then they move in next to a farm and immediately they have a problem with the farm, right? The noise early in the morning, the smells, blah, 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 blah. So residential encroachment on farms doesn't just gobble up land, but it changes the culture of a community. Sometimes at peril. Again, you end up with a couple of these folks on the town board, and before you know it, farming is less of an issue for the town board, right? So how we make their voices heard, what we know about the agricultural community is they work a lot, right? And they work a lot at real specific times. So right now is one of those times, right? In the fall, we'll have harvest. Don't try to get a hold of a farmer at harvest time. Don't try to get a hold of a farmer at planting time. Amish and Mennonite populations have their own unique challenges for communication, getting a hold of folks. One example, when we held a public forum for farmers, or I should say a focus group for farmers, we found the most centrally located farm with a big barn, and we had our focus group for the farmers at the barn. And all that farmers' neighbors came in and sat with us and talked us through. But that was when I learned the critical nature of slow-moving vehicles, the orange triangle, things I'd never thought of. But we were planning all these really cool, complete street profiles, and the farmers were looking at them like, "You're insane. My job is to get crop from this field to that barn, and if you narrow this road, I'm in trouble." And so it made us rethink our smart transportation approach, not derail it, but reform it to adjust the farmers. So go to where they are, to your question, go to where they are when they can meet, and hear from them directly. Then there are also, we don't want to let stakeholder or interest groups speak for farmers, but they can help fill in when we need additional information. So things like Cornell Cooperative Extension, they've been a really good voice for the farming community. We wouldn't substitute it, but we would augment it with Cornell Cooperative Extension. The Farm Bureau has been a really great partner between coming to the table and kind of talking to us about the legislative and policy-oriented things that go on, but also getting us in touch. Like, here's the most sophisticated Mennonite. Like, he's the guy you can get a hold of, and he'll bring all the other Mennonites to the room, right? Things like that. It's just about tailoring your public engagement strategy, whether it's farmers or school kids or college students, whichever interest group you're trying, or focus group you're trying to represent, stakeholder group you're trying to represent, you got to tailor the engagement strategy to get those folks to the table.
Carl, I think you're next.
Alright. Another two-part question for you here. If chosen, who on your firm will be working on our plan? Specifically, what areas will each one essentially be in charge of or specifically working on? So we kind of get a feel for who's doing what. Running the public meetings, doing the writing, creating the graphics, etc. And then the tail end of it is, please describe your ideas and approaches for holding public meetings and strategies for getting feedback and incorporating it into the community goals and objectives. You already touched on some of that
Yeah.
already.
Yeah, so in terms of who's gonna be doing the work, the way we manage projects at MRB Group is we identify one point of contact for the town. You'll have contact information for every single person on our team, and if you just wanna sit down and talk to Matt M, there are too many Matts in our firm, we'll change that. Adding more different names, not getting rid of it. But, so in that case, I'm gonna be your project manager, so the town has a direct line, a single point of contact to reach me. It's our goal that I attend as many as possible. I mean, you all have your steering committee. We recommend monthly steering committee meetings. It's my goal to be at every monthly steering committee meeting when that's possible. There are occasions where it just doesn't work out, but so my job is to facilitate that conversation each month and to make sure that the project is running on schedule, that we're achieving things that you want to achieve. Inside of the comprehensive plan structure, it won't look exactly like this because you all have a different funding source and a different approach. Every community isn't the same, but how it tends to work is it filters down from your vision. One of my favorite things to work on is the thing I glom onto in the planning process is visioning. So I'll spend a ton of time with the committee on that. Vision and values are two critical elements that I like to work on. What we ask ourselves during this vision and value process is remember the data. So we've got a good data report for you. We have an economic development team. Allison Slack is our economic development lead on this project. She comes to us from Empire State Development. She was a lead staffer at Empire State Development. And she works on a ton of our comprehensive planning efforts. Allison's going to develop out that quantitative data for us. She's going to hand us that report and walk us through it. That's a you are here. Matt Horn is going to work on you with vision. This is where we want to be. Then we're going to ask ourselves the question, what big chunky policy areas, what goals, you call them what you like, I like to call them priority policy areas. What big chunky policy areas are going to get us from where we are today to our vision most effectively? That's going to shake out in the form of things like housing, economic development, infrastructure, and sustainability. So if infrastructure shows up as a priority policy area, Matt McKenna is going to lead those discussions. He'll be our infrastructure lead on the project. When housing shows up, Allison Slack is going to be the lead on it. She's the economic development person I just spoke to. On the public engagement side, Highland Planning is going to manage that. And to the second part of your question, the way we work that is we come into the steering committee early, and I know you've already done some of the work on this. I've read some of the minutes, and you're brainstorming around surveying and those kinds of things. We're going to sit down with you and say, here's 30 tools in our toolkit that we find are valuable and that work for communities. You're going to look at those bunch of tools and say, that one will work, that'll never work, nobody reads that, nobody uses that, we don't have a town newsletter, and we're just going to start parsing that down to get to a community engagement strategy that works for you. One of the cool things that Highland uses that may or may not work in this community is their instant input tool. And that does two things. Instant input is going to be the basis for a project website that we'd like to develop. That's the 24/7 front door to the project. If you work overnight or you work during the week and you can't come to a focus group or you can't come to a steering committee meeting, then we're going to have that website loaded up with meeting minutes and project drafts and things like that you can pay attention to. But the other thing that Instant Impact is an application, a mobile phone application. And so if you think about your community and say, yeah, our community would use a mobile phone application. The reason why we like instant input is on the night of the public forum in the afternoon, it's going to push out a meeting notice to everybody who's got the app to say, don't forget to come to the public forum. It's at this time. When somebody's we'll push out a poll that says, hey, what's your favorite part of Trumansburg? Send us a picture. They can take a picture with their phone, upload it to the app, and it comes back to us. So we call that the photo scavenger hunt. We have people share, and we also ask the other side of it. What's your least favorite part of Ulysses? Where's Ulysses not working? And they'll take a picture of the thing the intersection that doesn't work, or the flooding that takes place, or whatever's jamming them up. So effectively, how we get people to come to meetings is by relying on your expertise to tell us what works in this community. We want to help you shape that public engagement plan, public involvement plan, so that it's tailor-made to Ulysses and that it gets folks out. It's worked well in the past versus us just saying, here's how we're going to get people to come out.
I'd just like to add, behind the names Matt added there, our team is supported by GIS. We have the economic development aspect. We've got site development engineers, civil engineers, architects with higher education, healthcare, broad reach that you may not see us day to day, but we have resources behind the scene that we can support a broad aspect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good then?
Yes.
Great. All right, we only have a couple more questions.
Allison, you're up next.
The next question is another two-parter. And we have started to touch on it initially in previous conversations. Our current zoning has guidelines for development in steep slopes adjacent to creeks, wetlands, and the lake. What would you recommend for us dealing with wetlands which have less protection in New York State? And do you have any guidance on how to deal with increased manure spreading and other factors that impact water quality?
You want to take the steep slopes?
Yeah, steep slopes, I mean, it kind of touches on what we referenced earlier with topography. I mean, it just compounds the issues right off the bat. Putting restrictions sometimes on development or size of the development helps protect those critical areas that, may have less or more impact over time with erosion. Erosion, once it starts, it's very hard to get a handle on it, and it's costly to protect those banks. So you want to make very educated decisions on where we could be looking at development and how that may impact water quality with runoff, because it can happen, and once it starts, it's very tough to get it.
Yeah, and I was rattling around in my head that Canandaigua example, guys. I knew I was missing an indicator, and one of them was steep slopes, because Canandaigua Lake sits like a lot of the Finger Lakes do with these steep slopes. And so that future land use map hemmed back from any of those steep slopes. So what has to happen is we have to create a future land use map, right? And some of that is, and we know the difference between land use and zoning. Land use, particularly future land use, tells us what we like the characterization of development to be. And so in places where we know there are strict, or steep slopes, I should say, or there are ecological assets, wetlands that need to be protected, in our future land use exercise, we would paint those bright green and say, this is a future conservation area. Now, the problem is it's future, right? It requires that a comp plan is conceptual. It's thoughtful and it's meaningful, but it's a concept and a policy document. So when it lands on the town board's desk, the town board has an obligation to, not an obligation, but they should work to align regulation with the future land use map. So at a minimum, when somebody comes in and says, hey, ABC Home Builders wants to build 50 or 75 homes on parcel A, but they need rezoning. Or they want a PUD, a planned unit development, or they want to engage some tool that's going to give them some density. What the town board should be doing is flipping over, again, my nerdy dream of they've got the comp plan under their arm, they flip back to that future land use map and say, it's going to be very difficult to justify upzoning a parcel that is shown for future conservation, right? So that's a protection. Thinking about manure spreading, again, back to those people who are fleeing Ithaca to get up here as close out into the country, and then they hate the country all of a sudden, right? They like the way it looks, but that's about it. And so with respect to things like manure spreading or really any any farming activity that contributes nutrients to the land that's ultimately gonna end up in the lake. We found that, regulation is the last step. It's the final frontier, and most town board, New York's got right to farm laws and all of these things that protect agricultural operations appropriately. We're running out of them, right? But in terms of also protecting the lake, we can work with watershed organizations to create things like lake-friendly farming designations. So we work in the town of Geneva. The town of Geneva has a lake-friendly farm program. And it's a little, it's a listing on a website and a little sign that goes in front of your farm that says, this farm is a lake-friendly farm. And what lake-friendly, you all might be familiar with clean energy communities or climate smart communities, where we give you a point system, and you do enough points, you get enough things, you get enough points, you get bronze status and gold status and those things. The lake-friendly farm program has about a dozen measures that you can take to ensure that you're not polluting the lakes. And if you get enough of those boxes checked, then you're designated a lake-friendly farm. Those types of programs, along with education, along with incentivizing, paired with light regulation, will get you where you want to go without the farmers showing up in droves mad at you for hindering your operations. So we like to first start with education, then go to incentives, then go to regulation when you can't get it done any other way. And then land use, right? Making sure that we're keeping appropriate distance from these ecological assets and agricultural assets.
Great. Just that lake-friendly farm program, who was that through? Ags and Markets?
Nope, it's strictly a town program.
Oh, it's
Town
just the
town
town
of Geneva
creates
stood it up, yep.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Great. All right, Mo, would you like to give them the last question?
Yes, it's a multi-part question related to public engagement that you've touched on. Can you walk us through your proposed public engagement process? How will you ensure we reach out to as many people as we can? What different methods do you propose? You know, website, mail,
Yeah.
etc. And how do you see your interaction with the public?
So I walked through a little bit of this, but to reinforce it, in one of our first meetings, we sit down with you and say, how do people in Ulysses communicate generally, right? How are we going to reach the entire population if we want to? Do they read newspapers? Are they social media folks? Are they postcard in the mail folks? Does the town have a newsletter that people read? How do we get people's attention, right? Then we ask the question, who specifically do we need to hear from? What are the stakeholder groups in the community that need to be heard from? We've talked today about farmers. There'll always be a question about village and town, right? How do we engage the village in this conversation? Small business owners, key community contributors like hospitals and school district and things like that. These are all people that typically folks want to hear from, right? And then we ask you, how do we get a hold of those folks? And if you have the answers, great. If you don't, we physically call the superintendent of schools. We will anyway for other reasons, but when we're creating a engagement strategy, we'll call the school superintendent and say, how best to get a hold of your teachers? How best to get a hold of your parents? Schools are hinky about, you know, we used to be able to shove things in kids' backpacks and send them home with the, but I guess everybody rained on that. Like everybody came out of the woodwork with those little flyers. So we can't do that anymore, but superintendents tend to know, hey, here's how you might get a hold of a teacher or a parent. In terms of specific tools, the digital stuff is cool. The website, the social media, people love that. High impact, moderate cost or moderate resource allocation is on events that are already happening, right? So we're up in Parma right now in Monroe County. In the town of Parma, it's a football town, high school football town. And so we set up at a high school football game, 2 high school football games actually, to get the community survey going. We wanted people, and what we typically do is a little postcard, got the QR code on it. You can walk up with your phone, snap a picture, and the thing opens up, right? Just recently, I can't believe I hadn't thought of this before, but we had a community tell us we are a big Facebook town. And everybody's on Facebook, and here's all these little groups. So we went out on a limb and did targeted Facebook advertising, promoted posts, right? And promoted posts let us draw a line around the community. This is the place we want to focus, and it's fenced. So when your cell phone reads that you're in such and such a community and you open Facebook, it'll say, hey, you should take the survey. And people usually will. We try to put a provocative photo on there. So if there's something that's really grinding people's gears in Ulysses, we'll throw a picture up of it. And people will say, whoa, and they'll click on that. Like, what's going on in Ulysses? Question mark, question mark. And somebody will click on it and ask you, hey, what should be going on in Ulysses? And we're able to parse the questions like, do you live in the Ulysses, or are you just someone who likes to stand off on the side of the road and throw rocks at Ulysses? We break those people up and understand how they're answering questions. Long way of saying, we have a lot of tools, and we've had good experience getting folks out, but it really relies on your understanding of the community, what you know about how people communicate here, and reaching those underrepresented folks who we really want to hear from. Ag folks. Ag folks are busy. They're not going to just randomly wander into a meeting, especially in season. But if we go to them, if we make time for them, we talk about location, making sure, we talked about being in the barn, we talk about time, we think about what are the barriers to getting people to this meeting. And we try to mitigate as many of them as possible. Food, pizza. We always make sure we have food. Also, our public meetings, I have talked a lot more. Matt has even talked a lot more than we talk at a public meeting. So our role in a public meeting is to try and get folks there. And then our public meetings are very interactive. We call it roll up your sleeves and plan. So you'll stand over a map and say, this is really working, this isn't working. I like the way this photo looks. I don't like the way that photo looks. Housing. What do we want? What do we don't want? We don't want a bunch of whatever. I don't think it's sad at that. So we're able to source all of that. What your role in that is to be present at those events, because people will talk to you a lot faster than they'll talk to us. They're your neighbors, they're your friends. They'll come out and talk to you. If we're standing there in a tie or whatever, they're gonna say, okay, another paid consultant came through town, right? And trying to tell us what we're gonna do here. So, I mean, that's effectively it. Our role is to make sure that the exercises are valuable. And your role is to tell us who should be here and how we can communicate.
Anybody else have any? Like a minute? 2 minutes? Any follow-up? No, I think the presentation was great. Thank you very much for answering our questions. And thank you for pulling together the proposals and responding to our RFQ. We have another interview that the committee is gonna go through.
I can't.
And then we'll be doing our ratings and our comparisons. Ultimately, the decision, we'll be recommending the decision to the town board, and it's ultimately up to the town board to choose the final consultant. But we really appreciate you guys making the time today. I know it was kind of a quick turnaround. And if you have any other questions or anything about the process or anything follow up, please feel free to reach out to Niels.
Great. You have our contact information. You can't guess wrong. Just look for Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One of us will be around.
and thank you all for having us here. We appreciate the opportunity. We're obviously invested in the area and want to continue our, having our stuff with them here. So thank you.
Great. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. So thank you all very much for coming. I'm Liz Weatherby. I'm the vice chair of the comprehensive steering committee. And I'm acting today as chair in Ann DePetta's absence, so she wasn't able to join us today. We have a couple of members of our comp plan steering committee that we have here too. I'd like everybody just to introduce themselves.
Mo Klein.
Carl Plankowski.
Roxanne Marino.
Hi, Vasily.
Allison Weaver.
And we have Caitlin Olson on Zoom as well. Okay.
I wondered about that.
So just to kind of talk a little bit about procedures first before we jump in.
Okay.
We have an hour allocated for this discussion. We're going to start with a 15-minute presentation for you guys, and then the committee's come up with 6 questions that we want to ask you. Topics are surrounding sustainability, housing, agriculture, the process and coordination, natural resources, and public engagement. So when we get to the Q&A question, each of us will kind of ask you one of those.
Okay.
You'll have about 6 minutes to respond, and then we'll keep going through that process. In your 6 minutes, Niels will give you a heads up when it's 3 minutes. So when you're halfway done, and then when 1 minute's left, just to make sure you guys aren't cutting, you guys can get in everything that you want to get in. Am I forgetting anything? Team? No? All right. Well, thank you very much. Please feel free to introduce your team, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Well, that is great. Okay. Here is our team. Let me, first, thank you very much on behalf of all of us for having us here tonight. We're really excited about meeting with you and spending some time with you. We put together a little presentation to kind of help lay out some of our thoughts to at least get the conversation started. So our team, yes, I think it's probably the most interesting part of our whole, what we have to offer is we've assembled a team for you. We are 3 different entities. Myself representing CRRC, which is a consulting firm that I put together last year. Whittam Planning and Design, and Joanne Cornish. Again, we all have background in planning, and then we have different sets of backgrounds that we pulled together specifically to, I think, to address the different issues that relate to the RFP and the RFQ that you put together. So I think this is again, a specially put together effort. We've worked together a lot. In fact, Scott and I just came from a meeting where we were working together. But over the years, we've all worked collaboratively.
Many decades.
Yes, indeed. On lots of different projects, including planning projects and some comprehensive planning projects as well. But this is the first time we've assembled together for something like this. And so, but it was done specifically because we were very interested in your offering and the project that you've put together here. And I think the opportunity it presents, not only us, but obviously for you all as well. So that's the layout of our team. I would serve as principal contact and lead. And then we have folks from Whittam Planning and Design, and then Joanne herself filling out the core group. Let's go on to the next.
If you have a buzzer, it's gonna be like, knowing this group for 15 minutes, we're gonna have to.
No. So myself, I've been in this business for now more than 40 years. But for the last 24 years, I've been in Ithaca, where I led their effort to work on downtown revitalization. And we worked with actually 3 different plans, 3 different 10-year plans. Each one of them geared toward coming up with a new series of goals and objectives for the community, which we were able to, for a large part, achieve, thanks to a lot of folks are assembled here. Worked on strategic plans. I worked on Plan Ithaca with Joanne, and Joanne will talk a whole lot more with that. Currently, I'm in the process of working with the city of Geneva on an economic development plan for the city and doing a lot of the same outreach. In fact, tomorrow I'm working on putting together a community survey that will be going out electronically for folks. So it's all a very similar effort. Trying to, again, help the community move itself to where it wants to go. My focus will be in economic development, tourism, housing, ag and rural spaces, transportation. I should say, when I'm not doing this work, I actually own a farm with my wife, a couple miles down the road. Where we raise, when we have between 70 and 100 animals that are fiber goats. And so we have a laughing goat fiber farm. So I have a special interest in agriculture and rural, because I not only work it, I don't do it tangentially, I actually do it. So anyway, that's me. Let's talk about some of the, Joanne, talk about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Joanne Cornish and I was the Director of Planning and Development for the city of Ithaca in excess of 25 years. I've also worked for the town of Ithaca and the Finger Lake State Parks Recreation Commission. Early in my career, I grew up in Ithaca. I'm a native Ithacan, which is one of those rare things. This is a community that I absolutely love. I've worked on a lot of comprehensive plans. I've had a great team. I mean, I'm retired now with the city of Ithaca. And I live just down the road from Ulysses, just into the town over the border. And I have a degree in environmental science as well as in planning and landscape architecture. And that's always been really important to me, the environment and protection of the environment. And I know the seeker laws, you don't stay in that position for as long as I did without being really familiar with what's important, first of all, to the community, what's important to the environment, and what we hope to maintain in a quality of life environment in Ithaca.
That's nice. Scott Whittam, Planning and Design, Michelle Palmer. Between Michelle and I, we have, I hate to say this.
Yeah, I can say.
Over 60 years of work in, we're both licensed landscape architects as well as regional planners and urban planners, and have been doing this work for many years. We have a firm of about 12 right now. We'll be 15 or so by the end of the year with some new folks coming on. And we work around the state and into Massachusetts. Most of our work is regional, Binghamton, Syracuse, Rochester, a lot of work in Tompkins County in this area as well, ranging from new park systems, from a lot of municipal plans, private development, all across a pretty wide range. What else do we want to say about us? Anything?
Housing.
We do a lot of housing.
Priority for everyone right now,
Yeah.
and we do a lot of things.
Yeah.
So we have a marvelous team working with us that range from young people just right out of school who have amazing computer and graphic skills to people like Scott and I who've been in the business for a long time. These are 3 of our staff members who will be working on the project, a landscape architect and 2 designers. Graham actually grew up around here, remembers going to Durango as a small child with his mom. And some of the lovely photographs you'll see later on are from the Black Diamond Trail that he happens to ride all the time. So we have the skills and we have the depth of people in our office where we'll be the people that should be interacting with the most. We have the depth of people who are going to be preparing reports, drawings, graphics, GIS, that kind of thing, right in-house.
Who does this?
Let's see. We could all.
We could all do it, right?
Do it, yeah.
So I've known Joanne since we were landscape architects working for Cornell Planning, right out of school. And I was president of Gary's board. And Michelle and I worked together for decades on and off as well. So it's a team that we know each other really well, and have produced both sitting on committees and on projects, a lot of work over the decades. So we have an easy relationship of knowing our skills and where we might fit in.
Yeah, and I think the other important piece of that is that we've all sat on both sides of the table. We've been in the approval position to be able to get projects and plans through to adoption with whatever legislative body we're working with. I've worked with the team when they were consultants for the city. But then when they were also working with their clients and across the table, and I think that that's a really important piece when you're working with a municipality and working with constituents and community members, that they know that you have you understand the legislative process, but you also know what it's like to be on the other side of the table and trying to get things through.
And some of the first work that I worked with Joanne on was pro bono work. And I think you could say all of us have worked together on some capacity or another on a variety of pro bono projects, because we're all people who are very involved in our community.
Well, we've all done planning, but I think we've also all done what I would call implementation. So if we're not just folks who know how to write a plan, that we do, we've done lots of and over the years. I mean, but I think what's been exciting, certainly for me, and I know for all of you as well, is that we also worked on the implementation side. So we help make things happen. So we know what that takes. We know what a plan, you know what it takes to go from a plan to implementation, and what sometimes are some of the barriers and some of the constraints. So I think that's something that we can bring, probably that other folks don't necessarily have in the same way. We not only know how to do planning and write plans and do planning, but we then actually, we then have been responsible over the years for a lot of the execution. And that gives us a perspective that I hope will be valuable to you.
And just a little aside, Joanne's saying she grew up around here. I grew up in Elmira. And so Ithaca and Taconic Park were the places we came for destinations to go on a picnic or things like that. But my husband and I moved here in 1984, and I lived on Applegate Road until my daughter was 6 years old. So, spent a lot of time at Taconic, a lot of time pizza at the Rongo, that kind of thing. And so it's a community that's dear to my heart, and I think all of us.
So a little bit about our collaboration. I worked on many plans with the city of Ithaca, New York City Parks Department, various other mostly governmental work. But we spent many years working on the city of Ithaca comprehensive plan, and that while it's a different community, there's a lot of the same concerns. And I've had a lot of advice and collaboration and phone calls with this team here. Gary and I met weekly for 25 years. Because we always want to bounce things off of each other, and certainly Scott and Michelle have been great advisors, especially when there have been some maybe sticky issues. It's not always easy, collaboration, but it is something that is vitally important, especially when you're working with a team of people, but also when you're working with a community. They have to know that you have a cohesive team, and that you're listening to the community. And I will say, as Gary said, I've done a lot of implementation of the plans that we have written. I've had a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. I'm not going to lie. It's not always easy working with a community, especially when you're talking about things like zoning. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the issue in Caroline, where it was really controversial, and could be in this case if some of the zoning recommendations are implemented. But it's certainly something that we've all worked on together. And I've certainly worked on many plans. Go.
I knew it would be crunch.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, how we will work with you, we put together our approach in our presentation, or in our package that we gave you. Just to summarize this real quickly, we really believe that it's important that plans reflect the community's interest and the community's opinion. And so obviously it's important for us to capture that. you're part of the process for capturing that, and that's part of your job, obviously, is to represent the folks out there. You know, so we're gonna be working with you and through you, and then also trying to reach out to folks who don't normally get involved, in an effort to make sure that, we can get as many voices heard as possible. Plans are only good if people believe in them. If the plan doesn't get used, it's not a good plan. So our effort will be to get you a plan that you will use and use and use.
Sure.
So why choose a local team? I think being a local team gives us a lot of flexibility. We're able to meet you where you are and in the ways that are best for your community. We live here. Decisions that are made in Ulysses affects the town that I live in, vice versa. Things that are decisions made in the town affect Ulysses. So I think having conversations that are across the board really help. And we do have a personal investment. This is our community too. I've lived in, like I said, Tompkins County for 40 years. And it's
Yeah, and just to put just a fine point on it, the reason we're interested in this particularly is that it's our home. And we see an opportunity to, as long-term professionals, team together on this. We talk about working together all the time, and to put this together here at home. 1 minute. 1 minute, Gary.
You're not, you know, you're not in a vacuum, you're part of a region. There are a number of different issues that obviously come into play. And when we do a plan such as this, we're gonna have to take those into account. I mean, I think what's really important is certainly this team and all of us here have worked and have wrestled with these projects and these particular challenges from top to bottom. And we know them well. What we need to know is how they affect you now and how they will affect you going down the road.
Joanne.
Sorry. So, I'm gonna make it really short. Community engagement, we have, done so many different types of engagement, and over the years, we've been able to, sort of hone in. One of the things that have been very successful are open houses. We like to meet people where they are in the community, whether it's local churches, the library, you know, the, music conservancy or wherever. So, we have a lot of different, experiences with the public, and getting public input that is meaningful will help guide us in the plan.
And I think so, our time is up. We
Yeah.
really want to get to questions and have a conversation. Yeah, absolutely.
We're gonna give you some more examples. That's perfectly fine.
No, and I'm feeling some of the examples, and if you ever want to
Yep.
pull up the slides or something,
Great.
might relate
Okay.
to some of the
Thanks.
questions. that
We
we're
are so
gonna ask you.
long-winded.
So-
Luckily, we work.
All of us.
No,
Yeah.
you're good. So really appreciate you guys pulling together that presentation. So we can get right into the questions. Again, you'll have 6 minutes after the question. Some of these questions do have a couple parts.
Sure.
And if you need anything repeated, or just let us know. But Roxanne, you are first.
Great. So our first question pertains to sustainability. So as you probably know, we have a grant from the Climate Smart Communities program to help us with this. And one of the key goals for our 2045 update of the comprehensive, our 2009 plan, is to incorporate sustainability elements throughout it. And so sustainability is a very broadly encompassing term. Climate change ties together and affects the approach to meeting planning and policy changes for housing and transportation options, for energy efficiency and affordability, for resilient infrastructure and preservation of open space, working lands, and natural areas. So we'd like you to please share your thoughts on some key issues and or approaches that Ulysses might consider to support more sustainable and resilient growth and resource protection in the face of increasing climate variability.
Michelle, I think you say sustainability about 3 times a day, so
Yeah.
why don't you?
So I think that, you know, at its most basic, the definition of sustainability is to meet the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations. And so that's something that's a broad statement that really applies to just about any topic that you can think about. But I think that in terms of climate change, one of the things that's been aside we didn't have time to talk about is my other role in life as I write and administer grants. A number of them have been with the Climate Smart Community Program. And there are really good documents at the state level that talk about the challenges we're likely to be we're going to be facing. One of those is called Climate Aid Report, and the things that are going to be affecting us in particular relate to weather and more intense storm events with shorter, durations, so that so there's issues of flooding, erosion, issues related to water quality. So those are things that affect just about any community in New York. And some of those issues are certainly going to affect Trumansburg. I think in terms of housing and sustainability, we talk about housing a lot. And right now, what we're hearing from developers is a climate that is not sustainable, and that they can afford to build supportive housing or affordable housing when there's subsidies from the state, and they can build luxury housing where they expect to make money. But it's that whole group in between that most of us fall within, that there's no financial incentive at this moment in time. There's no subsidies to help, and there's not enough money to be made. And that's not sustainable. That's something that we really need to, as a society, think about a lot.
And they're working with strategies to face that. It's a longer conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, sustainability cuts across all different disciplines. And so for most, even though you have it as one part of your plan, which is good, it interacts, as Michelle said, with housing, it interacts with economic development, it certainly interacts with natural resources. I mean, we were out taking pictures for this particular presentation, and I was doing that right after one of our big rainstorms. And all the creeks were just way high, and it just reminded me that, yeah, it's not very often, as many of us know, those creeks overflow because of weather events. And all of a sudden, something, it's becoming more and more frequent that happens. And so whether it's natural resources or planning for events like that, or just working with even where's the best place to locate housing? What's the best relative to transportation? If you're talking about greenhouse gas emissions and how you're going to reduce them as part of your plan specs, there's a whole strategy for how you'd want to try to do that. And then it relates to transportation, how you would try to reduce trips, and the best way to do that in a place that's so spread out. Provide some interesting opportunities as well as some challenges.
And the other, I think, piece that's really important is that, Ulysses itself in its capital project planning and its when you do get grants for any kind of improvements to the community, that sustainability is first and foremost because it sets the tone for the rest of the community. And so all of those things are really important.
It's a lens that you have to look at everything.
Everything has to be seen through the lens of sustainability, climate change, and what that means, because it's a real thing, and everyone's facing it. So.
Great. Thank you. Ty, would you have some? I will, thank you. So you spoke about housing a little bit, but this next question is a multi-part question related to housing. So there are limited housing opportunities in Ulysses. How do you see housing stability fitting into the equation with other objectives such as environment, agriculture, recreation, etc.? And what is your vision for improving housing availability, accessibility, and affordability? And do you have any relevant experience that would provide a good example of the town of Ulysses to consider?
Let's just start on that. Joanne?
Well, within the city of Ithaca, we have increased the housing types exponentially. It's been just a huge boom in housing for the city. But as Michelle said, and I think this is critically important, is that there's funding for affordable housing and there's funding for luxury housing because money can be made, but it's that middle area. And that's what most people are looking for. First-time home buyers are just being priced right out of the market in almost every community. And you also have to know where you want your housing to be. It's really important in the comp plan and what kind of housing, what's appropriate. what are your border communities doing? Are they doing housing in the town of Ithaca next to the town of Ulysses border? So there's so many things that you need to consider when talking about housing, but one of the things I think we want to discourage, again, it goes to sustainability, is that, you know, in a lot of our communities in and around Tompkins County, it's roadside development. That really is not the best way to go about things. Clustering housing is a much better idea. And certainly if we can put into effect some of the programs where you have cluster development or planned unit developments, or even purchase of development rights to protect the agricultural lands, but still allow some of the landowners to perhaps profit from their land. That kind of housing is really important. And I know when I was with the town of Ithaca, we did agricultural districting. A lot of farmers were really, really upset because that's their retirement, that they want to sell their property, make a profit, and then because kids don't want it, and there's no one to carry on those farming traditions. So that was one way that we approached protecting farmland, but still allowing housing.
And one other thing that we've been hearing a lot of buzz around is that with the housing shortage that many communities have, that planning, you don't want just willy-nilly people build whatever they want, wherever they want it. But on the other hand, you don't want to set up so many barriers that it discourages good
Right.
projects that you would like
Exactly
to
right.
see move forward.
Yeah, I guess a couple thoughts. One would be, you know, it's when the county did its housing study before the pandemic. It determined at that point, they were 7,000 units short of the county. And through a lot of aggressive work by many of us here, you know, we produced
A lot.
3,500
We made a
units.
dent.
But we haven't come close to solving, to filling that gap countywide. So that countywide need is still there. It is pushing pressure, that provides pressure on the town of Ulysses. I mean, I see it, I live 2 miles down the road from Ulysses, you know, at the town border with Ithaca, town of Ithaca. But I see around me and further out, folks moving out of the center city, finding cheaper housing, and or transportation options, but finding cheaper housing as best they can. And so this is an issue that's really important to Ulysses. You've got a lot of different types of housing already. But figuring out strategically where it should go and how to bring it online, and what's the best way to do that, and what's the role of the town in all this? And what partners will you use? If you're not a housing developer, you
Right.
never will be.
And one advantage we bring is we have, a dozen or so housing projects of every sort on our books.
Yeah.
At a time. And so working with developers of very different types of what do they need to bring to the table, right? And understanding that piece has been really eye-opening and educational. for the
Pressure
years.
too on the smaller towns and villages outside of the city and town of Ithaca. You're going to start to see pressure to build more housing because, you know, of those other municipalities trying to run out of room, and plus your residents and their families and their, you know, children, they're all going to want to live in housing that is quality housing, affordable housing. So you will see that pressure. So it is smart to be planning for that now.
Where a smart plan comes in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
1 minute, now we're like done. You're not.
We really like this topic. I mean, this is a very exciting topic, and I think it's a really important topic. I know, you know, when you did the former strategic plan, you know, and I know when I moved to this area in 1999. I mean, the west side of the lake was not considered a high growth area, right? All the growth was on the east side, wasn't even in the city at that point. But now it's obviously been a lot of growth in the city, and that growth has begun to happen on the west side of the lake. You're seeing it more and more, and obviously, you know, you're even seeing parts of it appear in different parts of Ulysses, and it's gonna be important to figure out strategically how best to deal with the issue of not just how do you produce housing, but where, in what format, and again, what's the role of the town?
Great. Thank you.
Also, tell us if we haven't answered these.
No,
Yeah,
you guys, I know
We're
there's
not shy.
a
about
lot of
talking.
different questions being
Right.
thrown out, but I think
Yeah.
everything's being hit, but we'll catch it.
Mhm.
So actually, the next question is about agriculture. So our town has agriculture resources that are important to our culture, but also our families and businesses. With the changes we're seeing in the climate, pressures from improving housing availability, as well as increases in environmental protection, what do you think the town can do to ensure that the farmer's voice is heard in this comp plan?
Well, that's a really good question, and I was thinking about how, because it is quite spread out. And I think you again have to meet the farmers where they are, their schedules. My neighbor, I mean, he is up at 5 and he is plowing his fields through the night. And so I think with farmers and anyone who has that kind of a commitment to the land, you have to meet them where they are. One of the things I was thinking too is the farmers market is a great place to start to meet people and to try and get some feedback from them. But I think we have, because you do have so much agricultural land, that is a critical piece of what you want to find out is what the collective thoughts of the farmers are. Now, everyone's not going to be thinking the same thing, but for the majority of them, we really should know what they're planning for their future, what they need for their future. Are their farms surviving? Are they able to make a profit? Or, you know, I mean, those are really important things in the agricultural community, especially now as we see farms being sold. And then, you know, not being able to sustain an agricultural community because nobody's going to farm. Nobody wants to farm in a lot of cases. So I think meeting farmers where they are and really being able to hone in on them and what they need and what they see the future of their farms to come up with a collective vision for agriculture.
Well, remember, I mean, farming is not a unilateral thing. There's lots of different types of farms. A dairy farmer is very different from a goat farmer.
A goat.
Which we have.
Or a beef-
Or
or a beef
you
farmer.
know, or.
And the wonderful bee.
Or somebody,
Other things.
or someone producing
Very
crops, or somebody producing grapes or something. There's just, or someone doing horses. It's a very, each one of them is very different. And each one of them has their own needs and expectations. There's some overlapping things. I know on my farm, for example, you know, we struggle to find hay. And that's one of our biggest inputs, and most expensive things. And sometimes we have to go far and we go way out of county to get it.
Having horses, same thing.
Yeah, and it's, and, you know, it's become extremely challenging. Even though we raise some, we don't raise enough. But it's, but there are lots of different things that have to come into play. And I think it's gonna be very important to look at the changes that are taking place. I suspect, I mean, I haven't done this, but I suspect, knowing what I know about farms in the region, the number of farmers is probably decreasing. The size of farms is probably increasing. And some farms are getting more and more on the edge, and some farms are probably getting better. And then some who are commodity based, I mean, I have good friends in the milk industry, it goes up and down. I mean, some years they're great, other years they're struggling like crazy. Just depending on the price of milk, the price of the commodity. So I think one of the things that we love to do and work with is to, again, have a good inventory, have a good understanding of what's here, what's changed, what's likely to change. Again, the relationship between agriculture and some of these land use is really, really important. And certainly economic development, you know, economic development at the expense of agriculture becomes a difficult challenge, I mean, a difficult trade-off, and something you want to be very cautious and careful about. I mean, certainly in this, Ulysses has its character has been defined by agriculture and its ruralness for hundreds, several hundred years. It's, you know, it's what you are, it's what you have been. And I think if the will of the community is to see that be that way, it's gonna be important to make sure that that continues. And so we're talking not only about easements and sort of development, purchase of development rights from farms, which I'm familiar with, because we did that on our farm. We actually have done that. So I'm very familiar with it, the pros and cons of that. But also, for vistas and landscapes, I do a lot of I live right next to the line for Ulysses. I ride my bike starting now through the fall, almost daily, through your agricultural districts. And the vistas are stunning.
So thinking of tourism in that, there
Oh,
also is
yeah.
there's a cadre of young people who want to farm, and they want to farm in a different way,
But
Right.
and that's an interesting.
But understanding how you're gonna maintain some of those vistas and some of that ruralness in the face of everything else that's going on is gonna be one of your big issues. And one I think, one that's workable, but one that's gonna take some effort on the part of everybody.
Yeah, one of the things
How to
in your
approach.
current comp plan was the scenic resources inventory, and I didn't know if that had been carried out. But I know in the town of Ithaca, you haven't done that yet. The town of Ithaca, we did complete a scenic resources survey, and it was very, very helpful in sort of laying out where development, what vistas and are really important to the community. And because, as we all know, West Hill is the best, I'm sorry, but the vistas from this part of the lake are just incredible and really worthy of protection.
And I did want to bring up the lens of sustainability again. I think that there's been a lot of conversation in the media that sustainability and farming are incompatible, and that's absolutely not true. I think it's partly an education process, it's partly a funding process. It's complicated, but they are not incompatible, and I think bringing that to the fore is important.
Yeah, and also ecotourism and agritourism to help farms have a little bit of revenue that is not directly related to the farming operations, but it does help a lot of farms get over that hump of not quite breaking even in the
It's a
farming.
great possibility.
Yeah,
in-
it's
in the
just
growth.
incredible here, yeah.
Okay. Great, I really appreciate that feedback. Carl, are you up next?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, the next question's another two-parter. If chosen, who on your firm will be working on our plan, and specifically what areas will each team member be responsible for? For example, running the public meetings or writing and creating the graphics, et cetera.
Mhm.
And then the final part of that is, where did I get lost here? And describe your ideas and approaches for holding public meetings and strategies to getting good feedback and incorporating it into the community goals and objectives.
Well, let's treat that as two separate questions.
Right.
I'll take the first one and then Michelle, why don't you kind of start on the second?
Okay.
In terms of the first one, you see the four principals who will be working on this project. We have some other more junior people who will be helping us from Whittam Planning and Design, who specialize in mapping, who specialize in GIS. Those are the people who are going to be helping us with the mapping in efforts that we've talked about.
Who also are excited to dig into.
Oh, yes, I will be the overall project leader, but we work as a team. And I think our approach here was, our thought on that was very strategic. We think, first of all, this is a fixed fee contract in the sense that, we're going to do this project for the amount we said we could do it at. That will take some work. Having said that, we know that, and we understand that, but we also know that working together, we're gonna be better than if we do it separate. And so we put together, again, and you didn't get the details on this, but obviously if we work with you, you will. The details on how we will work together, our team approach, each one of us will be a leader in one of these subject areas. So,
And while you're looking at that, I
Yeah.
just wanted to say that more meetings isn't necessarily better meetings. you know, it's having strategic meetings where you really meet people in the right way and engage people in the right way. I have been taken part in many meetings that I didn't organize. I'll take that back, where nobody came. You know, so what's the point of having a meeting if people really aren't there? So, you know, it's partly advertising, it's partly location, it's partly topic, it's partly methodology. There's a lot of things to making the right kind.
Or meetings where you go away from them and you didn't really hear the information, right? I mean, there was a presentation, but you didn't come away with what's important is understanding what the community is feeling, is thinking with that. We certainly have spent a lot of years and a lot of meetings in a lot of communities. And there are methods to being able to do that well. And we certainly recall methods of not doing it quite as well as we could. So we would bring that experience to this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of who's doing what, land use, you have Joanne and Michelle leading that effort. Let's see, housing, myself. Economic development, I will lead that. Transportation, Scott and I will lead that. We both have experience in transportation here in Tompkins County. Joanne will do the capital facilities one. She has led the capital facilities effort at the city of Ithaca for many years, knows it intimately. Michelle and Scott will work on environment and natural resources. They will lead that. Again, all of us will participate and help, but there will be a leader on each one. Climate change and resiliency, Michelle will lead that, I will help. Rural and agriculture, I will lead that with Mary, actually from Wood Planning Design helping out on that. Let's see, community well-being, Michelle and Joanne. Historic preservation, Michelle will lead that. And then in terms of outreach, we will all participate in the outreach efforts. Each one of them will be, one of us will lead various pieces of it to be sure. You won't have 4 people jockeying for position.
As we are right now.
But you are, but all of us have been experienced in working on sometimes very contentious projects, very contentious issues.
And some that could have been that turned out to be not, you know, because really listening and a process that worked. I remember, you know, a big one in Binghamton that could have gone south. But at the end of the day, we learned a lot. They learned it was a great project.
But anyway, yeah, so we will share that responsibility and work collaboratively in an effort to give you the best possible products and tools. Everything from a community survey would be it's very straightforward thing. We would do it electronically and in paper, so people have the opportunity to use both. We will, I certainly in some of our meetings, one of the tools that I use, and I use a software program that allows people in the audience to respond to questions, and we can tabulate them on the screen immediately and get responses. And everybody gets, the idea is we want people to feel like they're getting to participate. They're getting seen, they're getting heard. We don't need somebody to talk for half an hour, but we need people to understand that, that we will listen to them and what they have to say and what they have to offer is important.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Was that both parts of that question? Okay.
Yes.
I never got the second thing.
No, I think so.
Sorry.
We cut you out, Julie.
We've been whispered the time here, so.
Public meeting strategies. You got it, and how we could. Yeah. Great, and there's only 2 more questions, but then the next one goes to Allison.
Another 2-part question. Two questions. Our current zoning has guidelines for development in steep slopes adjacent to creeks, wetlands, and the lake. What would you recommend for us dealing with wetlands which have less protection in New York State? And do you have any guidance on how to deal with increased manure spreading and other factors that impact water quality?
Well, I'll let Gary handle manure.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but I will.
Well placed, Michelle.
But I will handle the environmental pieces. So it's really interesting, you know, there's been a lot of controversy and in fact, Supreme Court decisions recently about how wetlands are regulated. So there's been determination that maybe there's been some overstep by the Army Corps of Engineers and how they're regulating one. But if they're not regulated at the state level or at the federal level, it leaves the local level. And so I think you have a community-wide decision to make of how much you want to have local oversight and how wetlands are impacted. Because at the federal level, you can disturb 1/4 of an acre of wetland perfectly legally. You just file a piece of paper and you're good to go. And that may not be something that your community wants to happen. So that would be developing a local regulation around how that's regulated. In terms of the conditions you're talking about, streams, slopes, that's also something that you can put in your zoning ordinance. These are things that need to be considered. So you don't necessarily need to prohibit development in those, but you say, if you're gonna do it, you have to do it right, and you wanna understand what your plans are. And then streams, there are local regulations in the town of Ithaca where I live. They passed an ordinance a few years ago to, in fact, streams don't have a buffer at the state level. So they passed a local ordinance to establish buffers on all the tributaries that flow into Cuba Lake in the town. So that's a mechanism. If this is something that becomes important to your community to protect streams, then that, again, the levels, you have to consider it at the state level, but there's no prohibitions. Locally, you might decide you want there to be.
And we've certainly worked in a lot of communities with these strictures in their zoning and developed projects. But through the lens of those strictures.
Joanne, you've dealt with this.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that, in the city of Ithaca, you know, along Cliff Street, you know, there's there's a unique natural area, but also the very steep slopes, very erodible soils. So we actually developed no build zones. Because usually those erodible slopes and steep slopes are part of a larger piece of property. So that no build, because it's just too risky and you don't want to lose that. That's really part of the beauty of this area is the geologic formations. So we have a no build zone also in the city of Ithaca, and it was not popular. We have a stream setback. Of course, there's a lot of grandfathered properties, but any new properties, particularly as you get to the West Hill, I'm gonna say again, because it was the least populated 25 years ago in the city, and then it became more populated, lots of streams, lots of gorges, so we have 50-foot setback. And you cannot go that close to a stream any more than 50 feet. Wetlands, we also have a wetland buffer zone. Even if it's not a regulated wetland, there's still a setback for that. And the other, to be able to identify those areas as part of your comp plan and then begin to put in what legislation it's going to take to protect those, whether it's through zoning or whether it's through another mechanism. I think that's critically important.
Now, I'll put on my hat as farmer
Mm-hmm.
and say that, all right, in consort with zoning, you're now gonna have to have some incentives. Some other issues, some other tools to help make it possible for farmers in particular to be able to deal with issues like,
Yeah,
all right, my
absolutely.
manure is leaching into the into the nearby brook, or or in my case, into a wetland area that becomes a brook, which becomes something that ends up the lake. I mean, those, you can write a law that says, no, we will not do that. But that, the difficulty of getting that passed will be very hard, as you probably imagine. And secondly, so you want to do something, whatever we do from a regulation standpoint, it has to be done in conjunction with some sort of set of incentives or some sort of tools to help. Whether it's the farming community, the agricultural community, the business community, whatever impacting group that is, be able to better address that situation. And there are tools, and then sometimes it's a case of just getting on into the pipeline and knowing how the best way to do that. I know we're in line, my farm is in line now for getting a grant to help with our manure situation. But it's gonna be, it's still 2 years away. I mean, it's not a simple process to go from point A to point B, but you have to know how to do that, and you have to be able to get yourself in a position where you can help your constituents do. Otherwise, you can, passing a land use law, a regulation that is just gonna incur the wrath of your constituents is probably not in your best interest and probably will end up going nowhere slowly.
And that's why the input of the farming community is really, really important. Because they are the ones that deal with, their operations every day, and they're also very knowledgeable. About what is coming through technology. The technological advances in the farming community are amazing. Of course, not every farmer can afford to put those into practice, but I think it's really important to hear from them as well.
And they know their land.
And
They know their land.
part of it's education.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Wetlands play a really important role in helping with flood control. And if you're in agriculture, if you're a developer, if you're in business, if you're a homeowner, flood issues are huge and major part, they can be catastrophic. And so being able to convince people and sell people on the idea that wetlands isn't just a cute thing to do. It makes a difference in the way you will survive or get through a flood event. Could make it, that could be the difference between someone saying, good idea or terrible idea.
Our time's up on this, is that?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think we're good. So Mo, would you like to give the last question?
Yes, mine is on
The hardest
public-
one.
the last one, public engagement. Can you walk us through your proposal? Your proposed public engagement process? How would you ensure we reach out to as many people as we can? And what different methods do you propose, like websites, mailers, workshops? And how do you see your interaction with the public?
Maybe I'll start on that. The first thing we often do with the community, and we've done this for decades in terms of public engagement, is meet with our counterparts in the community and design this with them. What is the best way? And there's been amazing ways in some communities we've worked that I didn't even think of. In terms of sporting events, in terms of, there's one that had a church that really
Yeah, we've been to
was
church many times.
so important in that particular community where we learned an awful lot that was helpful to the process. So the first thing is sitting down with you guys and saying, what are the ways that you have seen in this community that word gets around and that there's a conversation, that information can come to us? That said, we worked with every sort of type of communication, and more that wonderful live online thing, because I was on your committee for that project. And the ones that we've the surveys, the amazing amount of responses that I didn't think, who wants to fill out a survey online? And then 400 people did in one neighborhood. So there's a range of possibilities. I think the important thing is to design them with you upfront quickly.
And we understand that you have been working on this, that you have a draft public engagement plan.
Right.
And so, one of the first things again is we designed these plans from scratch, but you already have
Yeah.
one. So working with you to say, yeah, this is great, or no, maybe we could do something kind of differently would be, one of the first ways. But as Scott said, it runs the gamut from, high technology to just having a meeting and shaking someone's hand.
Right.
And-
I mean,
and
I followed
everything in
what was
between.
going on with the field question, via social media. And was, a lot of information, and then going down to Creekside to have lunch and heard, there are ways here that,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, and one size won't fit all. More and more people are using in the internet and online capabilities to do things, but some folks don't. Surprising. I know I've got a cell phone, but some people don't. And sometimes it's skewed, it's skewed for certain segments of the population. So it's really important to think about, all right, what do you do with folks in that segment? There has to be another approach, another way. And so part of it will be, yes, I mean, we'll be doing some things with paper. We'll be doing outreach for, sometimes you can't bring people to where you want to go. You have to go find them where they go. Whether it be church, whether it be at a sporting event, whether it be.
Football game.
And that's where we talk to you guys. And obviously, we haven't seen your PIP. So we looked for it, we couldn't find
Couldn't
it.
find it.
But for whatever reason, so we didn't have it, we didn't have the luxury of going, oh, okay. But that's the first thing we would do is we'd say, all right, let's see what you have in mind. I mean, because we know what we've done in the past and what we can do, what we like to do and what we can do. We'll integrate that with what you're doing, and we'll also look to see where the holes are. Because there will be places where, but what about old people who don't know how to use technology?
How about this scene?
What do we do? What about those farmers? If you really don't like it, they could go out. But maybe we talk to the Grange, or we talk to there are different folks, different places where people do check in. And that's where we try to reach.
We're doing a project for the Ithaca Farmers Market, and we designed all these surveys and all. It's just going down there every weekend and walking. That I've learned an awful lot about how the vendors are feeling, how the people visiting are feeling, right, and hear it, and that's.
And I think as a group, we've gotten away from the talk at you kind of presentations. They hear us, but we don't get to hear them very much. And many people are uncomfortable standing up and speaking in front of a large room full of people. So as Joanne said earlier, an open house where people can come and go at a time that's convenient for them, talk to someone one-on-one, but also have at the same time have a written and question answer if they don't want to talk to someone. There's an option where they can just write down their thoughts. And
We do
answer
dots a
questions.
lot, just photographs and issues like traffic or erosion or whatever, topic is of interest that's been identified. And then we give people dots and we say, what are your 5 most important things? And it's great because there's people there to talk to them, but there's also a way for them to just say, okay, this is what's most important.
Conceptually simple too, like
It's
I have
very-
the dots in my head.
Yeah, I mean,
Here's
it
the- yeah.
really is a simple method, but you got a lot of great feedback.
And when we have a number of people in a group, oftentimes we'll break that group down.
Oh, yeah.
One of the reasons why I say, why would 4 of us come to a meeting? Well, oftentimes.
4 different tables.
We like to split that group up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's one thing for somebody, there may be people in this community who like to get up and speak publicly.
I
But
bet there are.
but there are people who aren't, who would say, oh,
Yeah.
that's not for me, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna do that. I'll let so-and-so do this, say their thing, and I'll just sit back here and.
But one of the first steps.
But so
is-
we find a way to make that happen so that that everybody can have a voice. Person who you expect to speak and the person who you do not.
And one thing, and I'll let you, one thing I wanted to say is we find a lot that negative voices often speak the loudest. And positive voices who have something to say don't always get heard. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind too.
But swing back around to the initial question. As were we to get this project, sitting down and planning out, okay, here's the end product, here's today, here are the steps. Does this make sense? Does this before this, right? And within that, having the outreach plan integral to the whole process is going to be important. And for the community and for you and us.
And maybe the last part of this is that because we're so local, since we're so close. I mean, some of us live, as close as you all do. And so it's a case where, transportation is not an issue here. And so that's one of the things that intrigues us about this. And one of the things I think we can bring value to is that we can hopefully be here more often. We can be here when you need us. And we can, we're not going to be crazy. And we also know that the public's only going to, there's only so much the public will take. You can only ask that question so many times in so many ways. But I think we are available, and we have the proximity to make this something that is not gonna be, a standard, okay, we'll do a public meeting and we can do it in a way, I think, that will serve your interest well.
I think we're time.
Yeah, I think we're done.
Yes, no, thank you, and I appreciate you looking at the time too.
Yeah,
Gary, Scott, Michelle, Joanne, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much for answering all the questions that we had here. Just so you know, what we're gonna be doing is we're collectively, we'll come together and we'll rate the people that we've been interviewing with. When there's a recommendation from the steering committee, that'll go to the town board. The town board ultimately is the one who'll be making the decision on which consultant to retain. But we will keep you in the loop as best as we can. And if you have any other questions or comments, or if there's something you get home, you're like, I really want to get that out, please feel free to reach out to Niels. He can be your contact, and then he'll feed us.
He's been very communicative with it.
Good. But we really appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate you responding to the RFQ. And we'll be in touch.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Follow-up questions? You can go to Gary.
Okay, great. So then for us, this also concludes our meeting today. So is there anybody who wants to make a motion to adjourn?
No.
No.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor? All right. Thank you all very much.
Now this is off the record, but